Okay, here's a quick demonstration on how you guys should be completing your charts and what it should look like. I'll use myself as an example via the quiz. I got erudite, so that means my one trait, my one behavior that's going to be turned on is intelligence. So when I come to chromosome number 1 and I look over here for honest behavior, okay, I have a couple different options. I know I cannot be displaying honest behavior, so let's just say that my phenotype is going to be not honest. That means there's only one way or one genotype for me to have for that, which would be little h, as noted. Okay, over here, little h means you're not honest, it's recessive. The only way to get a recessive trait is to have 2 of those recessive alleles. Now, if I come down to here, the behavior gene, okay, can be on or off. Now, I'm not honest, as determined by this genotype right above it, so that means I have 2 options. If I want the possibility of my child being honest, okay, I could actually have this turned on. And what I could do by turning this on is, okay, I'm going to say, let me have this behavior gene on. And that means it's a dominant trait. So where it says your phenotype for this behavior regulator gene, I'm going to put on. And my genotype for it, I get to pick. It could be either BB or big B, or big B, little b. In this case, what I'm going to choose is big B, big B. That's what I'm going to pick. And that's what your chart should look like so far. And then come down to the last one for eye color. This is a little bit easier. For eye color, what I'm going to have is, let's just say dark. And I get to pick here, dark pigmented eyes. We'll say big D, little d. And just give my child the opportunity to possibly have light eyes in the future. Let's go ahead and come down to the next trait. Over here, what we're dealing with is Dauntless Courageousness, this behavior. So what we could look at here for the phenotype, what we could say for the phenotype, since some of those tests actually also showed Dauntless, so I was 50-50, I'll say my phenotype here would be courageous, or courage. However, and so my genotype for that I get to pick. In this case, I'm going to say big C, big C. However, because I can only be up here, I can only be, as determined here, intelligent, okay, because I belong to erudite. That means when it comes down to this courageous behavior, it cannot be turned on. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have this behavior regulator off. And if this is the case, that means I have to be little b, little b. And then when it comes over to hair color, light or dark, okay, my hair will be dark, and that will be 2 of those little L's. Now let's go ahead and skip over here to this intelligence, because this is what I am. Since I am erudite, this is the one faction I do belong to. That means my phenotype will be intelligent, high IQ. That means my genotype has to be big I, or big I, little I. And I'm going to go ahead and go with homozygous dominant big I. Over here where it says behavior regulator gene, it must be turned on because this erudite is what I belong to, so it must be on. That's my phenotype. And I'll go ahead and choose big B, where I really had the option big B or big B, little b. I chose homozygous dominant for that behavior regulator being on. And where it says stature, can either be extremely muscular toned or normal. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and choose normal. 2 of the little m's, oops, that should not go there, and I'll write normal. Make sure you make your lowercase letters look lowercase, put a little tail on it like that. Okay, so this is what my intelligence would look like over here. Now if we jump over to our mate, okay, let's say that I want my mate's faction to be Dauntless. That means they're going to be courageous. Okay. What we're going to end up doing here is for honesty for my mate, again, they're in the Dauntless faction, so they cannot be honest, or they can't have it on, so maybe they are an honest person. So let's go ahead and say they are honest. And I'll actually, here's their phenotype, honest, and their genotype, because they're honest, that means they can be one of these 2. And I'm going to go ahead and choose big H. Now, over here where it says behavior, okay, regulator, because they can't be honest because they are in Dauntless, this has to be turned off. So their genotype, this means off, so they're going to have it off, and they'll have to be little b, little b. And then over here, dark hair, we'll just go, let's just say that they have dark hair. Again, they have dark hair, should be big D, little d over here. So we're just going to go ahead and use this example here to do a Punnett square. So what we're going to do, and this, again, this is my mate, okay, and this is their genotype for honesty. Now what we're going to do is come over here, and this is chromosome number 1 is for honesty. When we start filling out this chart right here, okay, we're talking about for gene number 1, which is honesty. So you would fill that in. Type of dominance, all of these are complete dominance except for height. Height is the only one that's incomplete. You have no codominance in this activity. So keep that in mind. So for honesty, complete dominance, our possible phenotypes are honest or not honest. Okay, and then there's none here because you would only use this line for codominance or incomplete dominance. And since we're not referring to either, we only have incomplete dominance once. In this case, since it's complete dominance, we don't have to worry about it. Our gene symbols for honesty will be big H and little h. That's what we have to worry about. Okay, so what we need to do first is our Punnett square. Now you're going to put your gametes here. Now I believe for my honesty, what I had was, let's see, I was not honest. If you look over here, okay, this was my genotype, little h, not honest, but I did have that turned on. So big B, okay, and not honest. So what we're going to do over here for honesty, I was not honest. So I have the 2 little h's. Now on the other hand, my mate was honest. And so if I look at my mate's chart, let's do that right here. My mate's chart was honest, so he had the big H, okay, but that was turned off. So keep that in mind. So we're going to come back over here, and what we're going to look at is my mate was big H, and go ahead and complete the Punnett square. So we have big H, little h, big H, little h, big H, little h, big H, little h. We have all 100%, 4 out of 4 squares, okay, of having a child that will be heterozygous dominant for honesty. So when we come over here, what's our phenotypic ratio? Remember, phenotype's honest to not honest. 4 to 0. 4 to 0. Okay, then we look at our genotypic ratio. How many are homozygous dominant? Do we see any homozygous dominant? No. How many are heterozygous dominant? Homozygous would be big H, heterozygous dominant, big H, little h. Over here, how many? 4. And how many are homozygous recessive, which is little h, 0. Okay, now what trait do we want our baby to have? We don't have much of a choice in this situation, just circle 1. Okay, so the baby's genotype for trait 1, which is honesty, is going to be big H, little h. Baby's genotype for trait 1, which is honesty, is going to be honest. Now this is the important part. This is how you get your baby to have 3 different factions. Okay, in this case, if we look at what, this is what we want our baby to be, and let's say that we want that to be the 3rd faction for our baby to have. So obviously we're going to make sure our child is going to be dauntless. Okay, so we know we want our child to be honest. We want that to be their 3rd faction. So now we're looking at, okay, trait number 2 on chromosome number 1, which is the behavior regulator gene. Okay, and this type of dominance is the same thing, complete. Like I told you before, everything is complete except for height. Our possible phenotypes are on or off. Those are your 2 options. This one's not applicable. We don't have to worry about that, only if it's codominance or incomplete dominance. Our gene symbols are going to be dominant for being on, which is big B, or the recessive allele, which is the little b, which means off. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, if we just glance back at what I had put initially for myself for honesty, if we look over here, we'll notice that I had that on because I was homozygous recessive for it. So I wasn't honest. So even if it was on, okay, I wasn't going to display an honest behavior. So that means, since it was on, my genotype for honesty, or for the behavior regulator gene, okay, in this, on this chromosome is homozygous dominant big B, big B. So that's what I'm going to end up putting over here. For me, I have big B, big B. Now, my mate, on the other hand, if we look at my mate, okay, they were honest, they were carrying the honest genotype. However, they could not be honest because they were, again, in Dauntless, so that means they had to have it off. So they had their behavior regulator off, and they were, okay, homozygous recessive. So that means when I come over here for my mate, what I'm going to end up putting down is little b, little b. So when I go ahead and work out the Punnett Square, this is what my result will be. 100% homozygous dominant, or heterozygous dominant for behavior regulator being on. So our phenotypic ratio over here, what are the chances? How many squares are on? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many are off? 0. My genotypic ratio, how many are homozygous dominant, which would be big B, big B. If we look over here, none, so we put 0. Heterozygous dominant, big B, little b, okay, 4. And then we look homozygous recessive, 2 little b's, none. So now we get to circle what we want our baby to have. That's easy. We don't really have an option. Circle any. So baby's genotype for trait 2 will be big B, little b. Okay, baby's phenotype for trait 2 will be on. So that means they will be displaying that honest behavior, and that means their third faction would be honesty, or their third faction would be candor. Now you get to pick what you want your third faction of your child to be. You know your child has to be your faction, your mate's faction, and then the third one's up to you. Maybe if you really wanted to be in Amity and you got erudite, that's the one you're going to pick for your child. So have fun with that. If you have questions, send me a message on Edmodo or to mdonahue.hghs@gmail.com. Hopefully this helped you out.